Hi everybody. Go ahead and take out your topic 5B notes, a highlighter or different colored utensil than you normally use, and a calculator, and then continue on with the video. Remember, topic 5B only had 2 lessons, 5.5 and 5.6. In lesson 5.5, I'm just going to zoom this in for you. We did basic things like adding and subtracting. We did multiplication, and we did division down below. And remember, with division, you guys, we need to make sure that we think about the denominator. So remember to check your domain for restrictions. And you should have that written down. Oops, I'll just put the R in front of it. If you have a variable in the denominator of that fraction, remember to simplify, you may need to try to factor as a way to reduce from top to bottom. The second part of 5.5 had us working with composite functions. And remember, a composite function is just when you evaluate more than one function at a time. You work inside out, and we talked about that with either a number input or a variable input. And you can also use that open dot as a means to determine a composite function. We defined that as f of g of x. So that open dot doesn't mean to multiply them. That open dot simply means composite. And we talked about specific restrictions in your domain if the function has a restriction. At the end, we just did application with the clothing option to try to determine which would be the better deal. Be sure that make sure that you can evaluate, I just got crooked with this, sorry. Make sure you can evaluate an application question. For the next lesson, 5.6 had us working with inverse relations and functions. Any set of ordered pairs can have an inverse that's a relation. All you do is you switch your x and y variables. But for an inverse to be a function, we need to make sure there's no repetition in the domain, and our domain and range remain all real numbers. So taking a look at linear functions, what we did was we sketched the graph, and then we flipped the ordered pairs around. We graphed it first, and then we wrote the equation. Down below, just kind of going through this a little weird, but hopefully you guys can follow along. To verify inverse function, come back to me. Sorry, you guys. To verify inverse functions, make sure you follow the steps to work inside out. And then one example worked, but the other one didn't work. We also took some time to work with nonlinear functions, like quadratics. Remember, when we sketched the original quadratic function and its inverse, we got them to not be functions of each other. The inverse couldn't be a function because it had repetition in the domain. What we did down below then was we just restricted the domain. So when you have a nonlinear function, that might be what has to happen, restricting the domain. And when we split it up to either the left side or the right side, then both the original function and its inverse were classified as functions, meaning that f of x was 1 to 1. Finally, the last thing we did for 5.6 was we took a look at stating restrictions for the domain and range for nonlinear types of functions and figuring out what the domain and range would be for their inverses. Taking a look at f of x and f inverse of x for example A, remember the domain and range for f of x were just flipped for f inverse. For B, because this was cubic, we stated that those were all real numbers. That would f of x would automatically be 1 to 1 in that example. So that's just a brief overview of the topic 5B notes. What I'd like you to do now is finish the 5B review worksheet. That would be your assignment for today.